Hi, I'm Steve Packard. I'm an expert in cybersecurity risk, and welcome to Cyber Risk Analysis. And Donald Trump has won the presidential election. That's a little surprising. It's not shocking to me or anything. It's shocking to a lot of people, but it's not shocking to me or anything. It's a little surprising, though. But the thing is, it's not that Donald Trump has won the presidential election. In fact, the elections were swept by the Republicans. The Democrats did very poorly. Kamala Harris did poorly, but she did poorly along with the other Democrats. And this appears to be a reflection of how people are looking at the current administration. And there's no surprise there because the economy is in terrible shape. Now, I know, somebody's going to argue with me here. Basically, for most people, they're seeing tremendous increases in the cost of living, which have not been offset completely by wage increases. Far less economic opportunity. It's very hard to get a job these days. It's hard to get a good job. A lot of people are relying on the gig economy. Jobs have less benefits than ever before. It's just terrible. I mean, you ask people, and upwards of 70% of Americans say that they're struggling. Now, the problem is the current administration and the Democrats have generally tried to argue against this. Well, look at the GDP. Look at the Dow Jones. Well, yeah, but that's inflation, as you're seeing there. The reason that went up so much is inflation. That's not a good thing or anything. These numbers do, in fact, lie. And even unemployment, it appears to be down, but when you really look at it, the number of people who are in good career building jobs is lower than ever. Their workplace participation is down, and even those who are employed, they're just not making enough money to get by. And you look out around you, you look at the street corner where there's so much homelessness. The housing market is just in terrible shape. I mean, unless you're selling your house, in which case I think you might think it's in great shape. But that goes to show a lot of members of the establishment are very well off to begin with. And the rich people of the Democratic Party and elsewhere have done pretty well. So they might think it's going okay, but it's not. These indicators are lies. I mean, it's not showing the whole picture. Inflation might not seem high because the CPI has not got up in a while, but the CPI is an imperfect reflector of that. It doesn't show some of the baselines for things like housing in specific areas, things that increase the cost of doing business. Really, people are not lying, they're not crazy, and it's disingenuous. It even comes off as gaslighting, the way that the supporters of Biden and Harris have just said, well, you're wrong, you're lying, you're not telling the truth, things are going very well. No, they're not. They're not. People are not crazy. And in that context, people are just so unwilling to send back these insulting, disingenuous people who've done such a bad job. So while most people do not like Trump, and believe me, Trump was not elected by zealots, he was not elected by cult members, he was elected by middle Americans. And this is very important to understand. Trump and other Republicans have garnered large support across demographics. It's not just white guys, it's not just the wealthy, it's not just Americans who are conservative by nature. Tremendous crossover voters. Even in blue states that he didn't win, he did better than anyone ever expected. And in demographics where he wasn't supposed to do very well, he did better than anyone expected, picking up votes almost everywhere and really doing better than any Republican has in like 40 years. So why is this? Why is the economy doing so poorly? Well, a great deal of it has to do with the ineptitude of the current administration, politicians, and business in dealing with cybersecurity. Yes, cybersecurity. It's not a tangential issue. It's not a minor thing. Now that we're moving into the fifth industrial revolution, we're fully in it. Everything is done online, and companies depend on the internet. You get most of your information through the internet. You do most transactions through the internet, and that's why cybersecurity is now central. And for the past few years, since the mid-2010s, and really since 2020 especially, we've seen an explosion in ransomware, and it's costing trillions of dollars. Yes, trillions with a T. Globally, ransomware is approaching about $9 or $10 trillion in economic losses, not just directly, but the ripple effects, lost opportunities. This is the disjointed loss that you're not seeing, that is difficult to see, but it shows up. It shows up everywhere. I mean, you look at healthcare. Healthcare has lost hundreds of billions of dollars. Yes, hundreds of billions. The United Healthcare hack earlier this year, which was so stupid it should have never happened, that cost healthcare more than $1 billion a year. Money that was absorbed by hospitals, clinics, doctors, pharmacies, and drives up the price floor of everything. So you might not see this initially, but your health insurance goes up, your premiums go up, your employer pays more, you pay more through your share of the payments. It's putting more of a strain on state healthcare programs, on Medicare and Medicaid. It's driven up the cost tremendously. Tremendous healthcare inflation from this. Tremendous inflation in the legal sector with all this sort of social inflation of these hacks. All of these lawsuits. And look at how badly it's affected municipalities, emergency services, government agencies. They've taken a bath on this. They've lost billions and billions. It's driven so many towns almost into municipal bankruptcy, and in some cases they have. It's hurt states so badly. It's sap money out, and it's really hurt our national security. It funds terrorism. Hezbollah and Hamas receive ransomware money through the Islamic Jihad of Iran, which is primarily funded by ransomware now. It's funded these irregular forces in the Donbass region. It's funded the war in Ukraine. North Korea uses ransomware. They use it primarily against Japan and South Korea, but it's now their number one source of funds. So the entire world, the axis of evil of the world that you might call it, is being funded by ransomware. And it's hurting us so badly. It's sapping money out of the economy, and it's doing terrible things to small and medium businesses. Thousands are hit by ransomware every year, and 60% go under after that. That's terrible. It's driven up the cost of insurance. Cyber insurance now seems mandatory, and it's become so expensive, raising the price floor of doing business. It's also raised the cost of lending because so many businesses have gone bankrupt. Well, bankruptcy by definition means you're not paying back what you owe. And that's caused huge monetary problems. It's caused huge problems in the lending sector. It's made money less available. It's increased interest rates. It's increased the cost of doing business across the board. It's a terrible situation. It's a boat anchor on the economy. It's destroyed people's lives left and right. People have lost their businesses. Doctors and nurses going home filled with stress because they can't help their patients. People have died in hospitals because of ransomware attacks. It's deadly. It's absolutely deadly. And that's really what is behind this terrible, disjointed economic situation where we're seeing the prices of everything going up in a very sort of insidiously baseline way. Cost of lending going up, less available money, small businesses going under, people not able to make their mortgages because they lose their business, the increase in cost of defensive measures, which are likely to be, in many cases, ineffective, the cost of other insurance subsidizing this out. You know, people like Warren Buffett, who, I mean, he's supposed to be a well-regarded, charitable person who cares about business ethics. But boy, has he dropped the ball at this because he's lied, or at least maybe he thinks it's true, said that there's nothing you can do and you will lose money in cyber insurance, and yet he still controls about an eighth of the cyber insurance in this country. So he's willingly losing money, and he's subsidizing it out by raising premiums on automobile and homeowners insurance. This is terrible. It's raising the cost of everything. Raising the cost of loans, raising the cost of doing business. You look at it hitting sectors like the fuel sector with the Colonial Pipeline, right? Foods being hit. All manner of consumer products. Manufacturers are being hit. This is really hurting the competitiveness of the United States and the economy, in the global economy. It's just terrible. Because this is the fifth industrial revolution, because IT is central, because it must be done properly, the fact that this is so common, that billions and billions, hundreds of billions being lost is not acceptable. It's caused us to have a terrible situation. It's contributed in the background to these increased insidious levels of inflation, economic opportunities being lost, people being stressed out, healthcare getting worse. It's all just terrible. Now, you might ask, well, what can we do, Steve, though? There's nothing you can do. Cybersecurity is hard. Oh, no, that's not true. This is not a technical problem. This is only a regulatory problem. Biden and others have refused to engage. I have tried so hard to get my senators, congressmen, governors. They don't want to listen to it. It's too newfangled for them. It's too newfangled for all these attorney generals. My attorney general just will not speak to me, and neither will my senators. And neither will my governor, or any senators, or any congressman. It's not only that they won't speak to me, they won't speak to any expert. They think we're too much of like these geeky propeller heads or something, and it's not their business. But the thing is, it's not a technical issue, it's regulatory. It's the fact that companies are not properly incentivized, and it really has a great deal to do with cyber insurance. Cyber insurance is the worst thing going on right now. It's the worst part of things, and it's what's made it so entrenched. Because these insurance underwriters are so ignorant of how cybersecurity works, and they're afraid to admit it. They've presented themselves as experts in cyber risk, and not a one of them knows their ass from their elbow, and they've driven the whole sector into the absolute ground. This can happen. It's really a true moral crisis. It's something like the stagflation and the economic stagnation that happened in the 1970s and 80s as a result of the workplace safety crisis, which was caused by a very similar problem, where insurance underwriters were willing to lose so much money on workers' comp and just subsidize it out. It almost destroyed the solubility and the viability of the insurance sector. It took a lot of work to fix it. but it took a great deal of the economy down with it. It also hurt and killed a lot of people in the process. And that's what we're seeing right now. Until federal and state level regulators are willing to give a few minutes to the actual experts and are willing to rein in and do something about the abhorrently terrible behavior of cybersecurity insurance, we're going to continue to have this problem. But the moment we start regulating it properly, the moment we force insurance companies to listen to experts, work with experts, and actually engage in loss control, the problem will go away almost overnight. But until that happens, the administrations in power will look bad because the economy will do badly. Because again, we're so dependent on IT these days, and everything happens in cyberspace. So until they're willing to do the right thing and behave properly, until cyber insurance cleans up its act, we're going to continue to see these terrible, terrible problems. It's really sad because we know all the solutions necessary to completely end ransomware. Most companies don't even back up their data properly, and that's exactly the kind of thing that these insurance underwriters, if they knew their ass from their elbow, if they understood anything, if they weren't so criminally negligent, they would actually have some meaningful requirements and they'd eliminate the problem. But it's a gravy train for these thugs, a gravy train for these non-sophisticated. Don't think they're sophisticated. Rarely are they. That's just a false narrative. They get in through the simplest of ways. Until there is an enforcement effort in both the private and public sector, until we start to value expertise, and until we realize that this is something that you just can't do without training, value certified experts, experts with experience, people who've been there and done that, as long as we have these geriatric idiots scratching their heads and saying, well, I guess it's high loss. It's inherently high loss because it's perilous and there's nothing you can do. That's why the premiums are high, because it's a hard market. No, it's not. It's not a hard market. It's a moral crisis. And the federal and state government need to do something about it. Companies like AIG and HSB, if you look at what they're doing, it is criminal. And people should go to jail for what insurance has done here. And additionally, states and municipalities and the federal government need to step in and realize that when they regulate their own agencies, that they need to listen to experts. They really do. They need to do something about this because it's actually really simple. If you wanted to, you could switch off ransomware like a light switch if you wanted to, but you have to know what you're doing. And that's why it is so important that politicians actually listen to and work with experts and take this threat seriously. I don't have a lot of faith that Donald Trump will, but I hope he does, because Biden could not possibly have done less. He couldn't possibly have, and neither has Congress, neither has the Senate, neither have states. They just won't do it because it's just too complicated and newfangled for them, too high tech, too technical. They don't want to do it. It's intimidating. They know that they don't know it. But what they don't know is that it's not technical. It's regulatory, it's economic, and it's largely because of insurance and the Wild West of lack of regulation. It's also because of the tech sector. They're taking the word of companies like Microsoft, which have always had a terrible security culture. But if you listen to me and you listen to other experts, you'll get clarity. And we can solve the problem. And I've been trying so hard for years just to get through to the proper policymakers so that the problem can be solved. Because if you wanted to, we could solve this overnight. And it would be a lot cheaper than continuing to endure these terrible losses. But as long as people like Warren Buffett and the chairman of Zurich and others insist on going on the record and saying that there's nothing they can do, and insist on asking for a government backstop to cyber insurance, that's probably the single most dangerous thing that we all need to oppose. I need to explain something. If that happens, it will be the death of this economy. We could end up in a 2008 style recession. That bad, because of how badly it's affecting the monetary supply and the baseline cost of doing business and how many businesses have gone under. If we subsidize this out through the government, when insurance has not lifted a finger to loss control this, we will only entrench it, and it will be the absolute death of our current economic cycle, which is already being so badly affected by all these cybersecurity losses. I know, you're going to tell me otherwise, but listen, I've been doing this for 20 years. I have a BS in cybersecurity. I'm highly certified. I've worked with some of the biggest companies around, and I've been trying to do something for years because, mark my words, as long as we continue to allow the insurance companies to behave so terribly until they clean up their act, it's going to get worse. And this year we're going to lose more than $1 billion directly into the pockets of these ransomware groups, probably more like $2 billion or $3 billion. And next year it's going to be at least 3 times as bad. Eventually, the infrastructure is going to start to buckle, It hasn't already, but it will be at least 3 times as bad last year. 3 times as bad next year. So something has to be done. And additionally, until policymakers do something, they will be held accountable for the economic devastation that this is causing. That's all you have to do. Just listen to the experts, put in the necessary loss controls. You can visit my blog at cybersecuritysanity.com to find out about some of this, where I'm doing a lot of work to document and detail exactly what has to be done because because it is known. There are no unknowns in cybersecurity. Of course there aren't. It's a fully engineered artificial field. We invented it here in the United States. There's not a single unknown in it. Not even one. They're just woefully ignorant because they don't want to know. They don't want to know. They'd rather lose money and hurt the country. But eventually something has to change. And the voters of this country will not allow this to continue. But Harris could have won if Joe Biden and the Senate Democrats and Republicans, the Senate Democrats and the House Democrats had actually done something about this. They could have turned the whole situation around. They could have reined in inflation, and they could have done a lot for this economy. But they didn't. And now they're suffering the consequences. And while I'm not necessarily a fan of Trump, I got to say they deserve it for how terribly they've done, how much they've hurt this country by refusing to do anything about cybersecurity.